Boy, I really wanted to like this book. I really did. It had all the potential in the world to blow me away. But no, it was so frustratingly close. And then... So I finally got around to reading The Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Aveyard? So I finally got around to reading this book. 2 years late. Congratulations. And I actually really liked most of the components of this novel. I eat up political fantasy. I love it. I like interesting worlds, societies, powers, and this book had it all. The world building was good, the politics were interesting, and I liked the family dynamics mostly. So why does this book make me want to scream, you may ask? Why is it so terrible if you liked all of those things? Well, you may have noticed that I left something out. The protagonist in this book sucks. That's right, folks. I hate Mare Barrow. Whew, glad I got that off my chest. Now let's dive into the non-spoiler review. I will say this. I think that a lot of people who are not me will actually really enjoy this book. I also think that it could have been an amazing book if most of the characters didn't suck, which they do, and which is why I am so gosh darn frustrated. The squandered potential of this book is truly astounding. But let's move on. What is this book about? Well, Mare Barrow, our protagonist, is a Red, and the Reds in the society are kind of the lowest class of people. They're there for hard labor and to become soldiers in a war. This war has been going on for 100 years, but I'll get into my problems with that later. There are also the Silvers, which are the superior class of people. They have powers, and they govern, and they're basically there to be rich jerks. Mare's best friend gets a notice of conscription for the war, and in an attempt to save him, things go terribly wrong, and she ends up basically infiltrating the Silvers and gets swept into that world. Shockingly, no one saw that coming. That's all you need to know for now. You may say that sounds terribly predictable and unoriginal, and you're right. It is. But you see, I don't really mind if an inciting incident is predictable and unoriginal if the rest of the plot and story and world is interesting. And I kind of found that to be the case in this story. I was pleasantly surprised by the plot and the world building, so I wasn't too upset about the kind of original premise and inciting incident that was a little bit lackluster. The part that made this book so bad was the characters. All of them almost were really boring. If you have ever seen any of my videos ever, you will know that I am very unforgiving with lazy character building. Characters to me are the most important part of a story. If you have an unoriginal plot but really super interesting characters, I can still like the book, but if you have an original plot and very boring, lackluster characters that are basically just cardboard cutouts or tropes, then you're gonna have a very hard time impressing me. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that I have 0 books that I like that fall into that category, and you can guess which category this book falls into. So to finish off this short non-spoiler section, I will say this. If you are a plot over character reader, then this book will probably be for you. If you are a character over plot reader like myself, then just skip this one and read Red Rising. The kind of premise is similar and it's just so much better. Now, time to really dive into this. On to the spoiler section. Let's start with the plot because my list of gripes for that is much shorter than that of my character one, so we'll just start with the war. It's set up in this book, but it becomes apparent very quickly that it's literally just there to create conflict for future novels. It's alluded to a lot throughout the story because it's a pivotal part of the world for both the Reds and the Silvers, right? Yeah. Except to me, this war is used as a plot tool and actually has very little meaning to the society. It doesn't feel properly established, probably because it wasn't thought out, researched, or developed nearly enough. The war doesn't really carry weight in this society, it's just a thing that happens. We don't really feel invested in it, we don't really care who wins or loses. We don't even know why it hasn't ended yet. Actually, we do. It's because we need more conflict for books 2, 3, and 4. Wars are expensive in materials, money, labor, and oh yeah, human life. Now they use this war in this book to make the Silvers dislikable. Congrats, you did it. And also to set up that Cal is a soldier. Great. But the actual side effects of the war? Pfft, we don't need to see that, right? In fact, no Silvers seem to actually care that this war is happening. It's used as training for their children, which makes it seem very inconsequential and not that dangerous, because they are sending their children to it without a care. Literally to train them. There's no patriotic propaganda. There's no Silvers that are opposed to the war, even though it's probably draining valuable resources from the kingdom. Nope, it's just a thing. Whatever. Moving on, let's talk about the powers, because those are actually very cool. The Silvers can basically manipulate things around them, whether it be water or light, or they're extremely strong, or some of them can even read minds. Their only limitation is that no matter the power, they can't create, only manipulate, which, I mean, doesn't really count for anything except for the external powers, because you can't create anything in mind reading anyway, but now, I'm being completely genuine when I say I really like these. I really do. I like the way that Victoria Aveyard writes action, and I like the limitations that the Silvers have with their powers. The only thing that I can think of that bugs me with the powers is, oh yeah, why in God's name are the firebenders the rulers of the kingdom when there are people who can literally control other people and Silvers that can read minds? There is no way that the firebenders, who, by the way, are constantly being defeated by the waterbenders in this thing, there is no way they would be the ones ruling the kingdom. They kind of suck in comparison to the other powers that the Silvers have. If anything, the families that would be ruling or competing to be ruling would be the mind readers and the ones that can control other people. And I'm just gonna throw this out there, but that would be such an interesting book to read. Could you imagine reading about the mind readers versus the mind controllers, even though the mind readers can kind of control minds in a small way? But it would be super interesting to see these two houses clash. I'm pretty sure the only reason why the people with fire powers are actually the rulers is because fire sounds super intimidating and cool, yeah? Okay. Also, just a super nitpicky side note, all of the families seem to be prescribed like the same kind of features, like silver hair or blue eyes or whatever, but does that mean that they're all inbreeding, or just does Victoria Aveyard just not understand how genetics work? Moving on to the politics in this book. I actually really liked the politics of this novel. There was a lot going on and I was constantly being sucked in and surprised by all the different levels of conflict. There was the politics within the Silvers, the politics between the Reds and the Silvers, and of course the Red Rebellion, which kind of arises against the Silvers. And all of these sides feel justified. There's no moral black and white, even though you obviously side with the Reds a little bit. You can see why the Silvers are justified in their own way. So the politics were actually really good. A+ for that. But now for the main attraction, the real roast. Let's talk about the characters. We'll start with the Reds. Mare's family is boring. They're boring. Even Giza, who's a little bit more well-established, is lame. She sucks. She's basically just there to make Mare jealous. She's perfect. She is talented, she has a job, and she's very selfless, which is why she ends up losing that job and talent, and you just feel pity for her, and yeah, it's not that interesting of a character because she doesn't seem to have any real flaws. And as far as the rest of the family, I don't really remember who they are, and I don't really care about any of them, except for maybe Shade, who we're told is dead at the beginning of the book, so that sucks. Killorn, who is set up as Mare's best friend, is basically set up as a useless idiot who whines a lot and can do nothing for himself. That's not the most charming character. Also, we have absolutely no development in their relationship. We aren't really shown their friendship, and Mare and Killorn have absolutely zero chemistry. The backstory is a couple sentences long, and we end up not caring about him at all. Shocker. Literally, I think he's just there as a plot device. The rebels aren't really fleshed out either. No one in the rebellion actually has that interesting of a character, or really a character at all. We know absolutely nothing about Will, who is Mare's original connection to the rebellion and has known her for a very long time. Farley, who is the badass leader of the rebellion, is maybe the most boring character in this book that has an actual part to play in it. She is so dull because her only character trait is that she's a badass warrior woman, and we know absolutely nothing about her. She never shows vulnerability once in this book. We have no backstory. She's just kind of there leading the rebellion. But, you know, whatever. Who needs backstory? I don't even actually want to dive into the other rebels because they're so boring and no one cares about them. So we're just gonna move on. Let's talk about the Silvers. Evangeline is basically the betrothed of Cal, one of the princes, and she's just there to basically be a roadblock for the Cal and Mare relationship. She's the small-scale antagonist for Mare. We don't really get any nuance. She's just there and hates the protagonist and is mean. The king is actually cardboard, I'm pretty sure, or at least he could be. He could just be a cardboard cutout of the king for half of this novel, and I don't think anyone would notice. He doesn't do anything, he doesn't have any nuance, he doesn't even have that many political opinions. He's just kind of there and lets the country do its own thing. He's just a puppet. Alara is the Silver Queen, and she is probably the most interesting character in the story. She is the main antagonist for Mare for most of the novel, and she actually has a little bit of nuance. You can see she's kind of a Cersei character. She loves her kid, and her kid is kind of her weakness, and then there's no love for her husband or anyone who is trying to take power for themselves or is a threat to her power, which is obviously Mare. Also, her power is really cool because she can read minds and control people, and that's awesome. Julian, who is charged to teach Mare about history and stuff, is just kind of the mentor dude, and he actually drove me insane. I hated his character so much because he's kind of this cliche mentor guy until Mare needs him to do something to advance the plot, and then he just kind of like flip-flops. He's like, nah, I'm not gonna do that because that's dangerous, and you know, it's probably a death sentence for me, and you know, I'm probably gonna be chased until I die because they will figure me out. Nah, I'm not gonna do that. Oh wait, yeah, sure, why not? You remind me of my dead sister, so screw my life, let's just help you out. Okay? So that's pretty much it for the side characters. Now let's move on to the two princes and of course Mare. So first let's talk about Maven. He's set up as the younger brother who's always in the shadows, which is hashtag relatable to Mare, who, if you guys remember correctly, is set up as always in the shadows of her sister Giza. Yay, they have so much in common. Wow, those parallels. I will say that he probably is my favorite brother though, because the author clearly favors Cal throughout the entire novel, and it's just my instinct as a reader, and I think most people's instinct. Yippers, that doesn't raise any red flags. So when the big reveal happens and he finally betrays Mare, everyone can see it coming. I would be shocked if anyone was truly surprised that Maven did this flip. The super heavy foreshadowing just kind of destroys the whole element of surprise, and the twist loses all of its power and meaning. Not only that, but when he does turn out to be evil, he is just a super flat, boring type of evil. Cal, on the other hand, we kind of start to like at the end of this novel. Once he does kill his dad, that's kind of when he gets interesting. But before that, he is not even interesting in the slightest. He's kind of set up as this distraction. He's the one that Mare is not supposed to be falling for, but does, and is supposed to be a wedge that drives Mare and Maven apart, and, you know, is that love triangle thing. But, the author clearly favors Cal, so it doesn't work very well at all. Not only that, but I don't actually get a sense of what his political views are. His character just kind of flip-flops, and he doesn't really have any strong beliefs or morals that I can tell. He did kind of state them a little bit in the middle of the book, I think, but because his character acts in ways that kind of contradict his values. I'm not really sure what his political views are, which is super disappointing because that's a huge part of this book, and that would make him an interesting ruler if he had strong political views and then back them up by his actions. One of the major problems of this book is that this love triangle is almost supposed to ground the story. It's supposed to be a main source of conflict for this book, and I don't actually care about the protagonist or either of the princes that much. I will also say that the romance in this novel is really downplayed. The actual romantic scenes are really lackluster and don't make me feel anything. The dancing scenes with Cal are rushed over and we don't really get a sense of, you know, her actually being present there. It's just kind of a thing that happens. Like, I'd love to have a little bit more of a sensory experience with that, you know, what Cal's hands feel like, what his breath feels like, and then when they do end up kissing, it's another lackluster scene, and it basically just says they kiss. The same goes for Maven. I think his romance scenes are a little bit more developed, but for the most part it's kind of the same thing. The romance is kind of put on the back burner on the side, and we don't really get a sense of the like feelings or emotions or senses that go with being with someone, and that for me is a huge failure. Even though I don't want the romance to rule the story like it does in a lot of books, I still think that it's important to make it sensory and enjoyable. Alright, and now we've finally made it. Mare Barrow. That name is super annoying already, but it is not nearly as annoying as her character. So let's just start out with the fact that she is destined to be a soldier, because this is just ties back to the war thing, but there is no way that that would be the case. If you do any research into history and war and actually feminism, you will understand that a war requires soldiers, and a war that goes on for 100 years requires a lot of soldiers. So there's no way that women would be going to this war. I know it's 2017 and we're trying to be PC, but there is no way that women would be going to war when they're the only ones that can produce babies. Obviously, having a lot of babies is really important in this society, so there is no chance that women would be going off to this war because childbirth sucks. No one wants to have families of 9 children, which would be necessary for a war that is that big, and to sustain that would require a huge army. Just do your research, guys. Come on. Moving on to Mare's actual character. She is super annoying and whiny for the most part, and I don't actually get a strong sense of what her beliefs are, and I also hate the fact that she never has to make any decisions because every other character makes decisions or sacrifices for her. Mare finds out that her buddy is gonna go to war, so she's like, I'm gonna bust him out of here, I'm gonna smuggle him out. And then she realizes that it's gonna be super expensive, so she gets smuggled into the city of Silvers and she's gonna steal some stuff. But she doesn't. And then Giza, who doesn't have any experience stealing, takes the bullet and steals something, gets caught, and gets her hand broken, and she can never sew again. So Mare doesn't actually make a decision to do anything. She just kind of goes to the city, but nothing really happens there for her. She just kind of sees things that are important to the plot. But Giza makes a huge decision and sacrifice. She makes the decision to steal something and then has to pay the consequences. Mare doesn't. Mare doesn't actually fix this either. She just kind of starts ranting to a guy that she meets at a bar who just fortunately happens to be the prince, but if it wasn't the prince she wouldn't have actually fixed anything. Giza would just have a broken hand and Killern would still be going to the war. So yep. So then she gets taken to the castle and gets a job there, and then for the true inciting incident she finds out that she has powers, but she doesn't actually do anything to discover that she has powers. She just kind of accidentally falls into an electric wall and almost dies. She's not even that mad about it. She's just kind of like, oops, falling. Oh wait, I'm still alive, cool. She doesn't actually make any decision that leads to that. It just kind of happens to her. Are you guys seeing a pattern? She doesn't actually make any strong decisions during her time with the rebellion. Maven does. He's the one who makes all the decisions. He's the one who gives up names. She just kind of is there to do stuff sometimes. Then later on, when the rebellion actually kills a bunch of people and gets captured, she's like, yeah, I should probably free them because they're my friends. But she doesn't do anything, really. She just find someone else to do it for her. Julian, awesome. And that trend continues throughout the entire novel. She's constantly being manipulated or getting other people to do the stuff for her, and she doesn't actually have to deal with any of the consequences until the end, even though she doesn't actually do much other than be manipulated to deserve those consequences. It's Cal who actually kills the king and is really the one who has to deal with those consequences psychologically. Mare is just kind of there again. So as you can see, Mare is not that interesting of a protagonist. She's not an active protagonist. She doesn't really do much, and because of that, she's not really an underdog, and we can't really sympathize with her, and we can't really like her that much. So to me, she's a really weak protagonist, and she's also super whiny and annoying, and I don't like her voice. She doesn't really have any strong political views other than I should probably help my fellow Reds, but anyone would have that opinion if they were her. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this rant/review. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.